via Franchise Consulting. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today. My name is Robert and I will be the MC. And just a few things to remember before we start. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation. Due to the large number of participants we expect, please type in your questions into your device. You will not be able to speak. You can enter your questions at any time during the webinar by just clicking onto the text box. Second, we will follow up with you in the next few days via email with some information, so keep a lookout for our email. Now, I would like to introduce to you our guest speaker, Mr. Sean Ngo. He is the CEO of VF Franchise Consulting, and with his background and many years of experience in franchising, he is uniquely qualified to lead our discussion this afternoon about how to franchise your business. And now we'd like to hand over the webinar to Sean.
Well, thank you, Robert. What an exciting day today. We have had an enormous amount of interest in this webinar, and we are expecting more to join us as we begin this process. So let us switch over to the presentation. Okay. So via franchise consulting is a franchise consulting company that specializes in ASEAN markets. So the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Many of you today on this webinar come from those markets. We do have others who come from places such as China or Taiwan or Hong Kong or even Japan. So we welcome everybody on this seminar. And again, it is about how to franchise your business, and hopefully to this part of the region, which is a substantial region. A little bit before we begin with the full presentation, what I would like to do is introduce our company for a few minutes. We'd also like to introduce a little bit more information about the region as a whole. And then, of course, start talking about some of the details about how to franchise your business. Yeah, franchise consulting has been operating for nearly 15 years now in Asia, and our goal had always been that we desire to be and are heading towards to be go-to franchise and licensing consultancies. And what that means is it's not only franchise brokering and helping brands find qualified investors and franchisees throughout the region, but it is also about helping us, helping our clients be able to franchise their businesses successfully and sustainably. We have a lot of uniqueness about our company. One of the key things that you will find about our company is that we have both your typical finance management consulting experience background, but we also have extensive experience in developing, in assisting, and in franchising many different types of franchises from an operational perspective. So, and that could mean F&B, it could be in retail, it could be in education, etc. Before we, I don't want to dive too much into the legal aspects. Of course, one of the key things we will be discussing later on during this presentation is the legal requirements and considerations that we must take. Select and Gibbons is a legal company with regional presence, founded in 1890 in Thailand, where they are headquartered. But as you can see, they have offices throughout Southeast Asia, and one of our key partners as we look to help our clients expand throughout the region and their specific franchising legal needs. Many of you who are living and working in ASEAN will know a lot more details about the regional economics. But as you can see, uh, the ASEAN countries as a whole, if counted as a country as a whole, would be the sixth largest, would have the sixth largest economy in the world. And that number actually goes up dramatically as countries like Indonesia by the year 2050 is expected to be the fourth biggest economy in the world. And number 19 and number 20 on the list, uh, uh, according to current projections, are the Philippines coming in at 19 and Vietnam coming in at 20. So it's a very exciting region and one of the fastest growing regions in the world, let alone Asia. A little bit more about our services. Again, franchising, licensing, consulting, and different services. And in fact, we are able to help companies find distribution partners as well as joint venture partners if that is what your business desires. And briefly, a list of our current clients, and you can see here many are in food and beverage, many are in education, and we also have retail and services clients as well. And this list changes from time to time, and new sectors are added, and new clients are added. So if you are interested in learning more about new franchise opportunities, of course, you can go back to our website, and all the current franchise information is listed there. Okay. And just a little bit about me. As Mr. Robert mentioned earlier, I am the CEO of this company. I am Vietnamese American and have been back in Asia for 15 plus years. And I've done many different things in my fairly long life. One of the unique things about franchising, though, was I helped bring in Carl's Jr. to Vietnam many years ago. If you are not familiar with Carl's Jr. is part of CKE Restaurants, and CKE Restaurants is the fourth largest hamburger chain in the world. They have over 3,000 stores worldwide, so quite a sizable brand. And so we were involved in that very early on. And of course, we are now more focused on the franchise consulting part of it. So, a brief history and the reasons why companies choose franchising. Um, one of the main reasons why companies fail in general over the long term, and it really boils down to basically three reasons. One, they lack the capital to grow. Uh, or two, they lack the people to help them grow. As you grow locations, as you grow your businesses, of course, you need the right HR, the right human resources. And then thirdly, some companies never even consider growing. And that is due to a lack of vision. These happen to be the reasons why companies fail over the long term because the competition is paying attention to all of these things. They are looking to grow. And if you are not growing your business, you are at a significant risk of not being able to compete effectively over the long term. In order to grow, many businesses have options, right? One is to grow internally by growing with internally generated capital or your positive cash flows or your profits, however you want to term it. We can also grow our businesses by borrowing, right? Borrowing from lenders of all types. Banks traditionally provide this role. We can also raise capital by going to equity, right? And that could mean an IPO, getting a listing, or even private equity, where somebody is giving us private money to grow the business. And the fourth way to grow, and the main focus of today's presentation, is franchising. And we'll talk a little bit more about what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of franchising in the next few minutes. Franchising first started in the US in the 1850s. A company by the name of I.M. Singer, which makes sewing machines, basically was the first known franchise in the world. And what people did during the 1850s was they went door to door, knocking and selling sewing machines. So the franchisees were the actual salespeople who would buy the sewing machines from IM Singer Company, and then they would then in turn mark up the sewing machines and go sell it door to door. Obviously, a very basic version of what franchising is, but this is how it really got started. Then in the 20th century, with the coming of automobiles and soft drink suppliers and drugstores, we got into franchising of Ford Motor Company. We got into franchising General Motors and their cars, for example, and then of course with the soft drink bottlers, starting with Coca-Cola. It was in the 1930s that food and beverage actually became a franchise industry market segment. And food service became very, very popular. After Howard Johnson in the 1930s, then came the likes of McDonald's and KFC and Burger King. And even some of the largest hotels in the world are all franchises, from Sheraton to Marriott to Hilton, etc. And according to Spinelli, he quotes, franchising happens when someone develops a business model and sells the rights to operate it to another entrepreneur, aka a franchisee. And in a nutshell, that's exactly what it is. Now, a quick few definitions to ensure that as we proceed with this discussion, you are familiar with a few key terms. Franchise is the business being duplicated or franchised under a franchise agreement. A franchisor is either a person or a company owning the business that will be franchised to someone. And the franchisee is the person or firm that is licensed to operate a franchised outlet from the franchisor. There are there are a few high level types of franchises that we should be familiar with. Most of us today are very familiar with what is called a business format franchising. And you've seen it everywhere. You see it around you, in your country, in your cities. They are the likes of McDonald's. And if you're in Singapore and the Philippines, maybe you're seeing Little Caesars Pizza or Texas Chicken or Della France or any of the major hotels, even education brands like Scholastic World of English or Helen Doron English or Cuco, Ace Hardware, etc., etc., etc. So these are the full service. Not only are you selling the products, but you're involved heavily in terms of creating the products, selling it at retail establishments, finding locations with lots of employees who are well trained on how to make the franchise successful. So that is your typical business format franchising. Product franchising, or sometimes called distribution franchising, is also another big segment. And these include, most notably, the automobile companies, the Toyotas, the Hondas, the Ford Motor Companies of the world, as well as some of the oil and energy companies like Exxon or Texaco, etc. So you'll find that many franchises focus on products in addition to the business format. And then finally, there are manufacturing, or sometimes we call process franchises. And they are the likes of beer companies that franchise their beer production to a local bottler in a different country. Or maybe it's Coca Cola or Pepsi providing that license to somebody in a foreign country to produce and bottle their products for their particular territories. So, in summary, and this is almost over, we're about to get into the meat of the presentation, so appreciate your patience. So, in summary, a franchise exists when you permit someone to use your name, your system or operation, and you receive some sort of a payment. Now, in franchising terms, that often means some sort of a franchise fee, some sort of royalties, and perhaps even things such as marketing fees, supplier agreements, etc. And then finally, why franchise your business? Now, the slide that we're covering today is sharing with you the advantages and disadvantages from a franchisor's perspective. Now, obviously, this slide would be slightly different if we were looking at a franchisee's perspective, which would also be good. And there are lots of advantages to becoming a franchisee. But that's another discussion, and that's another webinar that remains to be made by our team. So the advantages of franchising your business is fast growth. We talked about this right at the very beginning, and that is the main reasons businesses fail over the long term is that they are not growing fast enough. Now, what is fast enough depends on the industry, the company, and their capabilities. Obviously, we're not saying grow exponentially fast without being prepared and capable of growing profitably and sustainably. The assumption here is you do have those factors. You can grow sustainably, but growing fast is very, very important. A good example of that is Starbucks trying to grow in places like China, right, where they're trying to grow 1,000 stores per year. Now, Starbucks is not exactly a franchise. I won't get into it, but basically, they have local partners who will then help them grow the business in certain markets. Sometimes in markets like China, they are growing on their own. But in many cases, the reasons we have to grow fast is people tend to imitate us. They tend to copy us, right? And the faster we can grow with other people's money, with other people's labor, with their abilities to find many different types of ideal locations, which then supports the brand's marketing power because every new location that is opened up reinforces the presence of the brand and hopefully strengthens the brand. Another reason why we franchise our business is because we are looking for franchisees who will use their own resources, their own people, their own money, their own time, and they are highly committed and highly motivated to make it successful. Many franchises that are being offered in Asia, of course, are of sizable investments and are therefore very, very important to these investors to ensure that they have the proper returns that they are seeking. And from a franchiser's perspective, regardless if you are McDonald's or Starbucks or KFC or Little Caesars or Texas Chicken, you only have so much knowledge about different markets. And that's where finding the right franchisees, a capable, trusted franchisee, is very important because they hold more knowledge and have more industry networks and talent than you can possibly have as a franchisor because it is not your market. And of course, as the system grows, the efficiencies grow throughout the system, the brand power grows throughout the system, the economies of scale from a purchasing perspective grows phenomenally big and provides the franchise a highly sustainable competitive advantage. And having more units in the system also helps to enforce and uh, remind everybody of the higher quality commitments as franchisees are some of the best entrepreneurs who come up with new ideas to make the franchise better. Here's a little fact. I bet you didn't know that the Big Mac from McDonald's, which is one of their flagship products, one of their signature products worldwide. Actually, the idea came from one of their franchisees from a very long time ago. Now, there are many examples of this, whether it's with McDonald's or any other major brand. The franchisees, of course, are chosen for their entrepreneurial capabilities. Now, when you share the business with somebody, obviously there are some risks, right? There are risks that franchisees have their own mind and they are not employees. They cannot be told to do ABC directly. There needs to be some sort of human touch and relationship building that is important to ensure that you have a good working relationship with franchisees. It also, achieving growth is different from franchisors and franchisees' perspective. Remember, as a franchisor, you receive franchise fees, you receive possibly royalties and other payments. But from a franchisee's perspective, they receive their return on investment based on profitability and cash flow from the business, right? And sometimes the two are not aligned. And so it's always in your best interest to support your franchisees successfully because when they are successful, you will also be successful as a franchisor. And of course, there are a few other things like if you are selecting the wrong franchisees, they may harm your business. They may do more harm than good. And again, this comes down to making sure that you vet franchisees appropriately so that you are able to find the best partner for this relationship, right? So when you look at this franchise business, it really is a marriage, right? And sometimes that marriage can be as short as 5 years. Oftentimes it's more like 10 years, and more often than not, even 20 years and beyond. So you want to make sure that this marriage is a good fit. And now let's talk specifically about how to franchise your business. And there really isn't a foolproof list of questions that you can ask anyone to see, how franchisable is their business. Over the years, what we have learned and what we have honed on when we meet face to face and in person with a potential client, a prospective client that wishes to franchise their business, here are some of the things that we ask them. And these are some of the things that you need to consider to see whether your business is, first of all, at a high level without doing a lot of market research. Is it franchisable? And the first one is your business appealing to the end consumer, right? Is it fulfilling a specific demand for the end consumers? If you're McDonald's, for example, you're not going to want to sell beef into India, right? Or if you're selling, or if you're a franchisor that is specializing in pork ribs, you're not going to try and sell pork into a Muslim dominated country, right? So being knowledgeable about your business and how attractive it is to the end consumer is very, very important, right? Another question you may ask yourself is, even if it is appealing to consumers, do you think it will be appealing to prospective franchisees, right? There's lots of interesting examples of this. Uh, there are many people who are interested in franchising purely from a financial perspective. There are others who are interested in franchising just because of their own personal experience with the brand. And you see this a lot with some of the major brands that we see around us today. For example, people who are franchisees of McDonald's, for example, where as a kid they grew up loving the food, loving the brand, and even as an adult they still love the brand. And because of that, they are now attractive to that particular type of franchise, right? So again, is it appealing to prospective franchisees? And the profile of those franchisees we'll talk about a little bit later in this discussion. Another thing to note about franchisability of your business is, will increasing the unit count, having more stores or more units, help the system increase their profits, help the system gain economies of scale, gain bargaining powers with whoever it is that we are bargaining with. Sometimes the franchise system is bargaining with major suppliers like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, or maybe it's real estate developers for locations, etc. Right? Will having more units increase that economies of scale? And of course, ultimately, will it increase our profits, right? And of course, our profits take into account all of our increased sales from franchising, all of the additional expenses from franchising, and coming out with some sort of a return, right? In this case, we like to use the term EBITDA, or earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. And EBITDA is very important just because many franchisees and investors are very honed in on this type of franchise. And of course, there are questions about how many locations do you currently have, over how many years, and again, what are some of the difficulties that you have experienced over the years, based on that answer, right? One of the key things to get out of this too is, and it works best, again, when we have a face-to-face discussion with somebody, or if you review this internally with your management team, and that is, it is rarely, rarely successful to have a Me Too strategy, right? And what that means is, uh, you know, I can't just open up Sean's hamburger and expect it to compete with Burger King or Carl's Jr. or McDonald's or any other major chain that offers this type of product, right? A Me Too strategy is not a good strategy. It almost always results in failure. So what you have to take a look at is to understand, is your business unique? How does your business differentiate itself from the competition? Is it through service? Is it through products? Is it through the fact that you're servicing a specific target market within a segment that no one else is reaching, right? So it can be a combination of these things or more. So what is it that makes you unique? You know, is it a celebrity branded type of franchise, et cetera, et cetera? The more uniqueness to your products, the better it is to ensure that you have a franchisable business model. And again, if you have some special recognitions or awards, etc., that is helpful as you try to franchise your business either domestically or internationally. And one of the key things about franchising to others is your business trainable? Can you coach others to do what you do within a limited, reasonable time frame, whether that's 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month or 3 months, whatever it is, whatever the complexity is, are you able to train others on how to do this successfully so that they can take your proven model and make it so in their specific territory? Uh, and that territory could be another country, another continent, or perhaps even another city or neighborhood. And then finally, one of the key things that we always ask is your business's trademark, intellectual property, have you registered it? Have you protected it or at least begun the process to do that? And that is, in fact, very, very important that we will discuss in the coming slides as well. So once you've done that internal analysis and reviewed how franchisable your business is at a high level without taking up too much resources, then you need to make an additional commitment and do what is called a 5-year franchise strategy and development plan. Now, different people and different companies call it slightly different, but we're all talking about the same stuff. And really, at the end of this this phase 2, this 5-year franchise strategy and development plan, the idea is to understand fully: will you be successful franchising your business, and will you make money from franchising your business, right? And will you make sufficient financial returns to franchise your business? As exciting and attractive franchising is, it is a new business and therefore requires investments to be made in order to provide the appropriate returns. And what is included in the franchise strategy and development plan? Uh, well, there are things like, market research, right? We need to dig deeper and understand our markets, right? Understand the industries that we compete in, the territories that we are competing in and wish to expand to, right? So understanding where we stand in the industry against the competitors, as well as the overall industry and the industry dynamics. Is the industry getting too mature? Is it getting too competitive, or is it just growing, or is it growing and has a long life cycle? All these things we need to get a handle of in order to understand how franchisable and how successful we will be with franchising the business. One comment on the competition too, because ultimately, uh, this could be an endless exercise. So we need to understand when you are talking about your competition in your business, who are the true direct competitors of your business, and those that are perhaps indirect, right? What we see happen all the time in this region, especially in Asia, is brands will come to us and say, we have a list of 100 different competitors, But in reality, if you drill down and do the math and really understand, the target markets that we compete in and the segments that we compete in, usually it's just a few handful of direct competitors and lots of indirect and even substitutes, which we won't get into in this particular discussion, but lots and lots of indirect competitors, right? So again, really fine tune what that competition is, and it will make that analysis more manageable. One of the key things about your particular business too is, are the products and services going to be particularly attractive to certain markets, right? If you are a business that has halal certification, that certification and that similarity with other countries that require halal certification is very important, right? So again, what is it that allows you to uh, what characteristics of your business allows you to prioritize specific markets, whether it's based on the diet of these countries, the consumers of these countries, and how many consumers, the disposable incomes of the countries, even things like internet penetration rates, for example, if you do deliveries or etc. So again, determine what your key priority markets are, and that will allow you to focus your energies on these key markets. And other markets become more opportunistic. And what we mean by opportunistic, what that means is basically we don't actively go out and search for them. But if the right investor, if the right franchisee with the right capabilities and the right alignment with our team, our business wishes to do the franchise in their country, that might be worth exploring without us having to expend a lot of energy and resources to go find them. And again, alluding back to the differentiation, it is absolutely critical that if we want a business that is sustainable, let alone any franchise business, but just any business, we need to position our brand, our business. We need to have a differentiation strategies that makes us different, right? Different to consumers, and obviously, hopefully, different in the eyes of the prospective franchisees. Like any good plan, we have to identify risk and how we will mitigate those risks, how we will reduce those risks. And again, this is just a plan. There are lots of risks that are unknown until we actually go out and implement it. But if we can identify upfront risks, we should do so. And we should also plan to respond to those known risks. One of the other things that we do when we do a franchise strategy is to really understand who you are looking for as a franchisee, as an investor, right? And this is really important because if you are trying to sell a one unit franchise to somebody, that franchisee and an investor profile is very different than when Little Caesars Pizza looks for an ideal franchisee, because their franchisee is going to be much more capable, much better resourced, et cetera, et cetera. So, what is it about that franchisee and investor profile? What are the specifics that pertain to your specific industry, your specific segment? If you are in education, for example, do you require someone to have an education background? If your business is heavily technology based, do you need a franchisee investor who understands technology, or is that something you can train them effectively, et cetera, et cetera? And then, as part of understanding all of the expenses that you will need to have incur in order to support a sustainable and to grow your franchise business successfully, you need to understand that there are human resources that are needed as well as other resources, right? And how you will sell and market the franchise. All these things require resources, whether it's from franchise shows or doing business matching events or discovery days or ads online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things have expenses. And so it's good to understand what these expenses are, in addition to the people resources that are needed in order to make franchising, not only to sell it effectively, but to support your franchisee successfully as well. And then, of course, without you know, not being least, last but not least, are the legal requirements, right? Of course, we have to take a look at, what are some of the preliminary legal things that we must do in order to protect our business, and especially as we franchise the business to other cities, to other countries, to other continents. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this strategy document, this 5-year strategy development plan, should show you whether you will actually make money over the long term. Now, we say 5 year because that's typically how we forecast. I come from a finance background, so that's usually how we do a long-term forecast. But people can do 10 years, but at the end of the day, forecasting out 5 years is difficult enough, and lots of things obviously will not go according to plan. And doing 10 years almost impossible to do with any real accuracy. And then one of the other things that we should also do is, if we believe, that we can make money from franchising the business, one of the most important things we need to do as a company is to do an audit of the business, right? An objective audit of the business, and hopefully this audit should allow us to understand how our business is performing, how it is deficient, and what areas we need to correct in order to make the business more profitable, more competitive, and certainly increase the likelihood of success when we franchise the business to somebody else. Realize something very important. When we franchise a business to another entity, to another organization, to another person, we are losing a little bit of control, right? Because yes, we're going to do training. Yes, we're going to do quality assurance. Yes, we're going to help them with marketing, et cetera, to find the right locations, etc. Uh, you know, with supplier management, all that good stuff. We're going to do all of that. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are actually going to go and execute on this plan. And so franchising is difficult enough, just because we are now relying on the franchisees to execute according to plan, with our support, of course. But again, it's another entity doing this, and therefore we need to make sure that the business is as profitable as possible prior to hopefully franchising the business. And these audits can be, in the F&B world, we have a front and back of the establishment, the restaurant, the cafe, etc. So we would do audits, front and back. The back, of course, is more about the kitchen and storage, whereas the front is really more focused on the customer experience, right? And so we would audit the operations, the customer service. If there is merchandising, obviously there's merchandising, any in-store pop marketing materials, etc. If the chain has different store formats, or in education where you have different size formats, then it's a good idea to audit each of those different formats, just because they may cater to a slightly different target market, a slightly different offering, whether that's a product or a service. If you are in F&B, of course, one of the key things to any F&B establishment's success is making sure that the recipes are being strictly followed, that the food and the menu items taste like they should, right? According to the standards, right? So again, and a good example of this is a brand like McDonald's, where they make a Big Mac, and it's not exactly the best burger in the world, but it's the best burger for that type of burger, and it fits their standards. And every store that McDonald's has to make it that way, so that when the customer comes in, they taste the same product. It tastes the same whether they are in San Francisco or Shanghai, right? It has to be the same. And that's what we mean. The recipes must strictly be followed. A lot of times, it is important to interview, especially if you don't have an operations manual that describes the day-to-day operations of a business. If you don't have that manual, it is critical to ensure that you're talking to your accounting team, your human resources team, your training team, your procurement team, your project management team, your marketing team, etc. All the support infrastructure that is needed as you support new units that are being opened up. And hopefully those units are coming through, hopefully your own, company owned stores as well as through additional franchisees. And if you don't have an operations manual, many companies in F&B currently do not. It probably exists in some fashion or another, but has not been consolidated. Uh, it is a great idea and something you should do before you franchise the business is to ensure that you do have a good operations manual that is functional, well written, concise, and helps the franchisee as they open up stores and run the stores on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that you should always do, if possible, is when you are doing your audits, there are announced audits as well as unannounced audits. Announced, just because when you do an announce, you can really dig into the details. You can specifically talk to store managers and employees. You can see the back of the office, the front and back. Whereas if you typically do an unannounced and mystery audit. Sometimes that's a little bit more difficult to do, obviously. So ideally, you're able to do both. And again, the idea is to identify, what you're weak in, so that you can strengthen those areas, etc. And just one more comment about this section, and that is, we use a lot of examples with F&B, but it is the same whether you are an education business, whether you are a technology business, whether you are a service business or a retail business, etc. All of the similar process remain fairly the same. And as alluded to a little bit earlier, obviously the legal requirements is something that we need to ensure that we cover, even at a very early stages. So, the good news is there are very few countries in ASEAN today that require franchise registrations and actually have franchising laws. And those countries are Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Every other country has other, normal commercial laws, IP laws, etc., that will address any of the franchises that you wish to offer into those countries without any specific need for specific franchising laws. Now, that said, many countries throughout the region, legislators have proposed different types of franchise legislations, but to date, Those legislations have not passed, and of course have not become laws. But again, it is prudent for you as a business owner to be up to date on these things for your specific countries. Regardless of whether there are franchise laws or not, franchise agreements, all franchise agreements must comply with local country laws, right? So if you're franchising in, in Singapore, it must comply with Singaporean laws. If you're franchising into the Philippines or Myanmar, it must comply with those local laws, right? Any conflicts, local laws will take precedence. And in countries where there are specific franchise regulations, you'll want to be careful on a few key things listed here in the slides that require your attention, because these things have to be adjusted and added as a requirement. For example, in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, where there are franchise laws, international franchisors must have and must register what is called a financial disclosure document, or sometimes called FDD. So an FDD is a short document, unlike its cousin in the U.S., which can be 300 pages. In Asia, it tends to be a lot shorter and briefer, and for good reasons. But it is meant to protect the franchisees to disclose certain information about you as a business owner. And again, things like registration of trademarks and IP is critical. In some cases, you may need to register the actual franchise agreement. And in almost all cases, you actually need to localize into the local language the franchise agreements as well. So again, I won't get into the details. Uh, as mentioned earlier, we will be providing you with a copy of this presentation a little bit after and shortly after the webinar in the next couple of days. The main idea from this slide is you need to engage a qualified law firm with experience in franchising. Okay, not just any law firm, but a law firm that doesn't. They don't have to specialize in franchising, but they must have some good success and experience with franchising, with the franchising sector, right? A company like Telec and Gibbons, or perhaps another company of your choice. But again, somebody who is reputable in this particular industry. So we have only a couple more slides, so I'm going to try and move this a little bit faster so that we can get to the Q&A session as well. So the next step is, once we've done all those audits, once we've done the strategy, and now it's the preparation in terms of franchise sales and marketing, right? And obviously, some of the key things involved here. I'm sorry, let me go back here real quick. Some of the key things that are involved here is making sure that you have a plan of action to go market and sell, right? And a marketing plan, of course, as many of you know, covers many different areas. And in fact, it will include the sales part of it as well, right? And it also includes things like making sure, should you have a franchise sales presentation, do you need to create franchising brochures? You need to finalize on what your key franchise terms and conditions are. And your key franchise terms and conditions are something that we would have done in step two when we did the 5 year franchise strategy planning document. So again, what are the priority markets? What are the key terms for these priority markets and opportunistic markets? Do we have the franchise collateral ready? And then it's about actually going out and franchising your business, right? And how you are going to do that. Do you do it in-house and hire an experienced franchise sales executive, or do you outsource to a consultant like us or some other consultant, etc.? A lot of details, but certainly, very important to understand who your ideal franchisee investor profile is. Because once you understand that, then you will be able to structure the right franchise sales and marketing plan. For our purposes, when we help companies, we take those into account and we tweak our inventory of sales and marketing tools to accommodate different things, right? In our company, we like to do a lot of business matching events, multi-brand conversion in a city, a country within ASEAN a couple of times a year, and reaching out to targeted investors and franchisees. Some people tend to do franchise shows. Again, not probably not the most effective way to do marketing, but again, it just depends on who you're looking for and the size of the investments that you're looking for, etc. Okay, so again, this takes into account lots of different things from social media to digital marketing to doing discovery days, etc., etc. The main thing is to make sure that whatever you do, it is measurable, it is timely, and it is cost effective, right? Uh, Too many times people think I'm spending all these resources, uh, but it's too expensive. But I think a good way to look at this is I need to spend these resources because if I want timely results, if I don't want to lose that opportunity to a competitor, if I want to be in that particular market sooner than later, there are definitely advantages to doing all of those things, while at the same time knowing that you need to invest in these types of resources. And you know, once you have found your franchisees, by all means, make sure that you are structured. You have a franchise organization, a team in place to support your franchisees. One of the most important things that people ask us when we present franchising opportunities to them about our clients all around the region, and that is, how will you support us? How will the franchisor support us? Right? How will you support us opening the first few stores? How will you help us select the right location if location is deemed a critical factor of success in the business? Who will design the stores and the education centers or the retail units, etc. Right? When is training? How much is training? How much is training before we open the business? How much ongoing training do we get? How many times will you visit us in any given year? Right? So again, all of these things are critical support functions that a franchisor should provide because a franchisor will be receiving monthly royalties, for example, from their franchisees. And so in return, we must provide a value added service, right? How will franchisor help me control the quality of our business, right? And whether that means additional audits or mystery shopping programs or additional training as it relates to quality assurance or do product development, et cetera, right? So really, if you really want to make your franchise sustainable, you've got to be supporting your franchisees wholeheartedly. You've got to be helping them analyze their P&L when possible. And you've got to be able to share best practice with them, whether it's best practices about what you are doing in your own stores, whether it is other franchisees that are doing things that are best practices and should be shared with everybody else, or even somebody in the industry. What are they doing as best practices, and how are we able to continue with that? And one last thing about this particular slide in terms of supporting your franchisees is you got to make sure you have constant and consistent communication with your franchisees. Um, this is this is going to be very, very important as you continue to develop and strengthen the relationship with your franchisees. And hopefully, if you are doing this correctly, you will have many franchisees. And lastly, just one last slide, and this talks about the opportunities just in ASEAN. It's just amazing, right? Indonesia, from recent data, we've seen that there are over 1,100 different franchise systems, right? Like KFC would be one, McDonald's would be two, for example, right? There are over 1,100 franchises and a lot of different stores all around the country and growing. In the Philippines, which has actually one of the most developed franchise industries in Asia, let alone ASEAN, has over 1,500 franchises and contributes, and that franchise system contributes about, $22 billion US dollars in 2017 and closer to 25 billion US dollars in 2018. That's about 7% of their gross domestic product, their GDP. Thailand also has a very developed franchise market, over 500 franchises and a market value of 250 to 300 billion Thai baht. Vietnam is growing and has grown quite fast over the last 5 years. They currently have over 230 registered franchises as of March 2020, and that number will balloon as the industry continues to develop from both new brands as well as many local brands. Malaysia, of course, is a developed franchise market with over 900 plus registered franchises, and their franchise industry sales are a big contributor to their GDP. Singapore, city state, very small in terms of population, but punching well above their size, has over 600 franchise systems and over 30,000 franchisees. And even markets like Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, every time we are in those markets, there is an enormous demand for new business opportunities, for franchising opportunities, etc. And to put this all in perspective, in China, at the beginning of 2019, there were close to 4,400 franchise systems registered with the Ministry of Commerce in China, and contributing over 60 billion US dollars to their economy as of that time. So you can see that throughout Asia, whether it's Taiwan or Hong Kong or Korea or Japan, and of course in places like China, franchising continues to boom. Some final thoughts, and this really is the last slide. You know, make sure that when you are growing the business and want to franchise the business, and you've gotten yourself ready to franchise the business successfully, you need to do the right thing. You need to make sure that you are selecting the right franchisee. A lot of the disadvantages of franchising goes away if you do the most important thing first, and that is selecting the right franchisee. And the right franchisee is not the franchisee that gives you or offers you what you want in terms of key franchise terms and conditions. There's got to be more than just money, right? It's got to be the right fit, the right mindset, the right attitude, uh, the ability to work well with you and to communicate with you as the franchisor, and vice versa. That is what we mean when we say the right franchisee. Do the most important things first, and that right franchisee will almost help to ensure you success as you grow the business, either domestically or internationally, right? If you're a little weak. If you haven't grown as big in your domestic market, by all means, do your best to grow in the domestic market first. If you feel that you have a business that can be that was built and born to be franchised internationally from the get-go, by all means consider that. But the typical route has always been focus on your domestic market first, and then once you get to an appropriate size and experience and support structure that you can provide your franchisees, then you look at ASEAN. Don't go to the US, don't go to Australia, don't go to Europe, don't go to Japan or China or etc. More developed markets. Those are very competitive markets, and so you want to make sure that the closer the markets are to you, the better the chance the cultures are similar, the thinking is similar, and the consumers are similar. And the ability to support them because they are a short, plane trip away is very, very important. Again, it goes back to saying again, the support that you give to your franchisees is very, very important to the success of the franchise system, right? You've done the hard work of finding them. Now it's supporting them. Okay. And then, of course, uh, do not take franchising as a new business opportunity lightly. If you do it lightly, you are most likely going to fail. Give it a lot of thought, a lot of planning, and of course, you need to apply the right resources. And if you don't have the right resources, then consider franchise consultants like ourselves. So there, I actually finished. It was a long topic. We have a lot of people on this webinar. I just wanted to make sure that we have covered everything that is important. And now we are ready to begin the Q&A session. So I will hand this back to Robert.
Much, Sean, for sharing a lot of useful information about how to franchise a business. As Sean mentioned, now is the time for our question and answer session. So please don't go anywhere. But please remember you can ask Sean your questions by typing them into your device. And you can do that by clicking on the small question mark at the bottom right of your screen if you are on a laptop or computer. On your phone, it's at the bottom. Just type into the normal text box, and we'll go through the questions one by one. So we have some questions already. We can begin.
So Augustine asked, is manufacturing suitable for a franchise business? That's a really good question, and it's a very difficult question to answer because normally when we talk to people, prospective clients, about franchising their business, we get to know what their business is. We have a face-to-face meeting. A lot of times we have to visit them in their business to understand their business a little bit more before we can, say whether it is franchisable or not. As mentioned earlier, if it is a process that you are franchising, like for example, what Coca-Cola does, where they allow somebody uh, you know, uh, to make Coca-Cola in their country using their recipes and their secret sauce, and using their bottling capabilities, then certainly it is doable. Again, it just depends on the complexity of your manufacturing business. But as mentioned earlier, manufacturing and process franchises are aplenty in today's world. Okay, Arfa says, can you give examples of successful education franchises and what about franchises for arts and culture, for example, theater performance companies? This is a really good question. And Arfa, if you are interested in education brands, I would highly suggest that you contact us through the emails that we have provided earlier, and we can set up a conference call to talk specifically about these things. In general, education franchises are some of the most attractive franchises in Asia. Globally, obviously it's important globally as well, but even more so in Asia because of the ethics that we have and the attitude that Asians have towards education, and particularly education for young learners. So there are many, many examples of successful education brands. Some of them are our clients today. They include brands like Scholastic World of English, Helen Doron, with Helen Doron Education Group, which has English, Helen Doron English, Math Writers, which is their math STEM based franchise, and even kindergartens, Helen Doron Kindergarten. We even have a digital franchise where we teach English and Mandarin virtually 100% digital. And again, that's a phenomenal franchise, in Asia already. So there are lots of examples. Wall Street English is another great example, right? So again, lots and lots of good examples. And it's not only about English training, it's not only about math, arts and culture, theater performance, dance, little gyms, for children, even things like, programs that focus on creativity, coding programs, etc., etc. All those things are highly, highly attractive throughout Asia. So again, Arfa, if you have any specific questions, I suggest you contact us sooner than later to discuss further. Joms says, considering the technical recession due to COVID-19 pandemic, can we convince the franchisee that is a good time to invest in a franchise business? Joms, thank you for this very relevant question. Obviously, you, along with me and everybody on our team and everybody in Asia, were most likely to be doing this call from our home office. I certainly am. And certainly COVID-19 will have a major effect. However, uh, in the countries that we have visited so far this year, and we have visited Cambodia, we have visited Myanmar, we have visited Thailand, all in the first quarter of this year. Wherever we went, there has been enormous interest in franchising. We have not seen a drop off. Now, a big part of it too is the fact that many of the companies that we are talking to are looking for long-term businesses. Some of them are looking for new business opportunities to either diversify into another business and to leverage their skill sets, their capabilities, their infrastructure, or maybe it is to look out for the next generation in their families. So again, it can be a combination of all these things. So, and in the world of COVID-19, you may find that some people who used to work in the corporate world have decided that maybe leaving their hands leaving their livelihoods in the hands of a an employer may not be the best thing for them, given their expertise and their experience, etc. So again, personally, we have not stopped promoting and discussing franchising opportunities with anybody. In every market, we have seen lots of activities, etc. And obviously, there is a huge demand for that. And funny enough, there are many businesses today that have been affected by COVID and in their particular country or city, and have looked to franchising as a way to diversify the risk that they have in their specific country, in their specific city or territory or region. So that is also another good opportunity to look at not only increasing new opportunities, but also to diversify your risk profile by doing that. Lisa says, "What new staff would I need if my business does franchising?" So that's a very good question as well. Obviously, you need someone to be in charge of franchising, right? And usually that's somebody who is a franchise manager, or depending on the size of the company, it could be a franchise director or general manager of some sort. But then also you need infrastructure, right? You need support from people in accounting. You need support from people in IT, in HR, in real estate if you have real estate, in design if you have design, in marketing, in training, etc. So if you can't hire people to do that, or if the franchise manager who is in charge of the franchise business can't do that, then you need to have some sort of support, and they can come from your core team that you already have, right? Or perhaps maybe you outsource some of this stuff to other people or other organization, or perhaps other consultants, etc. Selena asks, what documents do we need before we can franchise? Well, clearly, one of the key documents that every franchisee will be looking for is an operations manual. So, a lot of companies have an operations manual if they have been in experience. I'm sorry, in business for a few years, but it may not be written well, or it may not be consolidated. Little bits and pieces are here and there. So it's very important to get a complete comprehensive operations manual for your particular industry, for your particular franchise. And if you need assistance with that, Selena, then certainly contact us and we can help you with that as well. Oh, sorry, hang on. Oh, we did that before. I'm sorry. Hang on. Somebody asked me earlier. Oh, Seem. I hope I'm pronouncing your name okay. What is a master franchisee? So, a very good question. A master franchisee basically is a franchise granted to you or somebody as a master franchisee, and you in turn can sub franchise or sell that franchise to others in your territory. Now, yet that territory is defined by you and the franchisor, which owns the brand. It could be your city, it could be your district, it could be your country, right? And so, again, that's what that term means. You are able to sell and sub franchise the brand. And this is often a very attractive feature for many investors because they are able to recoup their initial investments in terms of franchise fees that they must pay to a franchisor quicker, right? Because it allows them to sell the brand and to expand the brand in a particular territory sooner than later. And oftentimes you have to share that franchise fee, that royalty that you collect from the sub franchisee with the franchisor. But it should be a win-win situation. Um, the one thing I will note on master franchisees is that it is important to understand that as a master franchisee, you are expected to support and train the sub franchisees as well. So it isn't just about taking someone's money, but you also have to be supporting them as well. Okay. Yan asks a solution that might be more successful on franchising after developed in your own country is to set a pilot project in the desired country where you want to franchise, adapt to the country in every aspect, marketing products, full team in place with the right people, and then any new franchise sold, you as owner, franchisor, or your number two will be on site to follow up and finalize each new franchise. Jan, thank you for that comment. You are absolutely correct. If you as a business has the right resources, then you may want to expand into another country, another territory with a pilot project. But again, for many companies, this is usually not the greatest idea due to limited resources. Remember the resources that we talked about, not only money, but also people, the people to manage it, the people you need to hire to run the business, right, etc. So it's normally and of course again the local knowledge, right? You need to have somebody who understands the local marketplace. And sending one person from one country to another may help, but they certainly would not substitute someone with local knowledge and local expertise doing this. But it certainly is an option if you are. We have an instant demand that needs to franchise for a branded chain of coffee shop in Vietnam. In case we want you to be our franchise consultant, so what scope of work will you do for us? Or are you the one to tackle all key questions for our business? Very good questions, Ree. Thank you for your comments. Obviously, please contact us after this webinar, and we will be happy to set up a call, a meeting. Well, I guess in these days, a virtual meeting with you to discuss more specifically about this need. To tell you the truth, and we've had enormous interest in this webinar. I think over nearly 500 registrations. We have a lot of people online now, and there are probably quite a few people like you, Zri, who are in a similar situation, and we look forward to learning more about that. So again, please contact us, and we can certainly provide a scope of work and a proposal after we understand a little bit more about your business. As I have already registered with IPO, we plan to franchise our modeling competition. Are there any limits on this for offer franchise or for offer franchising? Again, I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, Alalin. I'm sorry, Alalin. Please contact us with more details. But as I can tell, you looks like you registered for the initial public offering of some sort. So again, without some further details, this might be a little bit difficult to address. Financially, how does it work when you expand your franchise outside your country? The investment, the fees, royalties you receive back from franchisee. So Jan, earlier in this webinar, we talked about the 5-year franchise strategy and development plan. So this is the type of research and analysis that you normally would take in order to understand your industry, the potential for your franchise, and setting the key terms and conditions of your franchise. Things like franchise fees and royalties, and also determining whether one, you get the sufficient returns for franchising the business, but also you have to model the financials, the P&Ls, so that you understand that there is a good chance that your franchisee will be successful with the business when they actually operate the business and open the business in their particular country, even after they have paid the franchise fees and royalties, etc. Again, Jan, this is a really great question. If you have a specific need, I would highly suggest that you contact us via email with more details, and we will set up a call to discuss further. Thank you for your question. Franchisee, please give example on product distribution franchising. Um, Ben, if you were on the webinar earlier today, you will have heard that in today's world, there are many businesses, franchise businesses that are based on products and distribution. So again, it could be distributing a certain technology. It could be distributing a certain product like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, or it could be, an automobile or a product of some sort that requires little training, but allows your franchisees to basically buy the products and distribute the products in their markets with little or no support beyond the actual products themselves. If you have specific questions about that, then certainly contact us for more details. We'd be happy to help you with that. Tao asks, where can I find a place to learn from A to Z about franchise in Vietnam to prepare knowledge and action in the future? A very good question. Unfortunately, I don't think there is any website that has all of this information. It is all over the place. Certainly, depending on what you are looking for in terms of franchising knowledge and experience, certainly you can contact us and we can help you where needed and if there is a demand. But again, franchising is an industry where you are looking for someone who has, a long, lengthy experience and support structure that can cover many different areas, whether that's F&B or education or services or retails, etc. So this call has gone on for an hour and a half. So I realize your time is very important. I would like to thank you all again for attending this important webinar. Uh, I think it is exciting to know that there are so many businesses out there that are looking to franchise the business. I will say this, it takes time. It can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months in order to prepare to franchise your business. And the sooner you start, the better, so that when uh, the current situation frees up, you are able to take advantage of that. Right? Like the saying goes, the early bird gets the worm. So with that, I will hand it back to Robert.
We'd like to thank everyone for attending. For your specific questions, look for the email that we'll be sending out to all attendees, and please feel free to email us or give us a call with your questions. We'd be happy to answer them for you. VF Franchise Consulting offers a wide variety of franchises in food and beverage, education, services, retail. We regularly run business matching events and webinars to share information. And we look forward to following up with more detail with all of you at a later time. So please keep an eye out for our email in the next few days. Thank you for attending and have a great day.